Hello, everyone, and welcome to Potential of EdTech, the Next Normal. This evening, we will be hearing from EdTech leaders on how the next normal will shape relationships, financial plans, and the evolution to meet consumer expectations. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Emily Levitt, Vice President of Education at Sylvan Learning, who has graciously agreed to be our moderator for the panel discussion this evening.
So I want to dive into our topic today, and just now that we're entrenched, what do we do? What have we done that's worked? What have we done that's not worked? So what I want to do is start there and ask the panelists, how have your relationships with the people you serve changed? Like, aside from them wanting more of your product or wanting it remotely, what else has changed? And what was the catalyst for the change, and how did you adapt? And then the third part is, are you going to keep that post-COVID? So Aaron, I'm going to start with you because I know you've had some big changes from this time last year, from having worked together in the past. So let's hear all about it.
I don't know that we have enough time to hear all about it. What I will start with is saying that I could almost isolate the year into two phases as far as our transition. The first was this rapid need to show up and use technology and find ways to reach people where they were and penetrate through a lot of noise. And then the second phase was almost finding ways to use technology to be more personalized. And that shift for us was a really slow one, and in some ways a difficult one, because it required us to think about how to use tech that was keeping personalization off the table. People were, we've all just been screened out this year. And yet that was the tool that we had to deliver our services. So when we broke into, I guess, March, everything was already migrating online. We felt very good about that. And customers, the clients, I think customers is an understatement, clients that we really care about needed something to serve their needs, their audience. So we're almost like a B to B to C in some ways. And our adaptation was very much, let's move to technology. You want to keep distance, you want to keep like safe and healthy. But the second half of the year has really been, everyone's burned out. We need some engagement. We need something to feel like we care about them. We need to hear their needs. And that shift almost felt like a more difficult shift in moving to technology and moving virtual. And I think we learned a lot about how we connect, and we learned a lot about how our team connects, and we learned a lot about how not to connect and what feels distant for young adults in particular. So there have been a lot of good lessons this year.
Good, thanks. And are those changes ones you're planning to keep post-COVID?
Yeah. The idea that we can now scale and reach beyond the walls of Baltimore and beyond wherever our car can go is tremendous. But it is something that we consistently need to revisit so that it doesn't become just another rote on-screen product that doesn't bridge the gap between, someone seeing it and someone internalizing it. And I think that's a deep question in education that I come to a lot is, if we're moving online, how do we make sure that someone watching, because that's typically what they're doing, is really, really excited about it? And that's a big question to ask.
Emily, you're on mute.
I thought I just took myself off. All right. So Bryan.
We now have an official meeting, Emily.
We do. I'm just waiting for my dog to bark. So Bryan, you've had, aside from the acquisition, which is a huge change in and of itself, what were the things that kind of shaped your year that were unique to 2020?
Wow, that's of all years in the history of EdTech, that's probably the best question you could ask this year. Yeah. To say it's been a unique year is an understatement. It's been, I'd say revolutionary for all things education technology right now, especially online learning, but anything related to, education technology tends to be hot right now, of course, because of COVID. So as far as, how the relationships changed and some of the things that really changed as far as a trend, when we got into COVID, I think everybody was frightened. I think everybody was a little worried about what's this going to mean for our business. I think that even though we thought we might be relatively okay, we realized that a lot of our clients were not going to be okay. So the first thing we did was get very resilient. We cut costs anywhere we could. And I think the theme for us ended up being resiliency, because we didn't know how it would affect us. So we actually had, we were going to hire about 5 people at the time. I think we cut that down to 2. We were in the process of the hiring. So it's, we didn't have offers out the door yet, but we said, okay, what are the 2 most essential people? Who could we do without right now, just in case? We'll put the others on ice. What other costs could we cut? Obviously, travel was going to be removed, obviously, to help us. Where could we save some money on marketing, not go to conferences, and then maybe find new ways of selling? A massive change for us, because, mostly we were doing selling remotely, but that went to 100% selling remotely. And could we be more effective? Could we be more cost effective in that way? And we found out we could be later on, but we really didn't know. So I think that our entire business and the way we did business changed. And I think that that's, there's so many other ways I could explain that change happened that I could go on for an hour on that, because it was such a wild time. We made so many changes. We were going in, we got rid of our office. Anywhere you could cut a cost that wasn't going to affect the business, because be ready for whatever happened. So that changes definitely. And then of course with our clients, our relationship changed dramatically. We have about 50% of our business colleges, universities, and their use of the system went up anywhere between 3 times to 10 times usage patterns that we were seeing. So all of a sudden they needed, we had a period of, I think about 10 days where we took 150 colleges from face-to-face to fully online. And it was probably the craziest week and a half of all of eThink history. Every hand on deck, every trying to get, constantly on the phone, trying to help people understand what they would need to do to plan out to make that massive shift. So definitely big changes, to say the least, and changes we see happening, continuing in 2021.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think the last time I saw you was in back when you're still in Baltimore.
Yep.
Yeah, back in the early days. So going back to a comment you had about changing the way you sell from face-to-face to more remotely, what did you find appealing about remotely selling aside from the cost savings? Or what were the other advantages you saw?
Yeah, so the best advantage for us was we have this incredible team of people that are experts, and we're a people business because we were using an open source platform. So it was more, yes, we have tech, yes, we've wrapped things around it, but at the end of the day, the people are definitely important, but there would be certain people that might be better suited for certain demonstrations, or one demonstration is 30 minutes, and then maybe an hour later you want to bring somebody else in who maybe would not have been able to fly 2 people out to see a client or prospect. So you had the ability to bring in more experts, and the clients would become more comfortable because they'd get a chance to meet the team that would actually be working with them. So that was a big change, I think, to an extent, in that the people that used to say, we want you to come on site, which was sort of an old school mentality, they would almost not get that same opportunity. So I think it improved our ability for them to accept that they would be selling. It was less, we wanted to probably sell remotely all the time. So we didn't wear salespeople out, but I think there was more of an acceptance that that's how you had to sell. And that, I think, is probably relatively permanent.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, that's where I was going. Is this permanent or not? So now it's that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So Aimee, you have more of a global overview of what's been going on, kind of a post-grad, not just in this country, but kind of everywhere. Can you give us your point of view?
Absolutely. I think the first thing we have to say is that EdTech accelerated about 10 years. Things that we didn't think we'd be doing 5 or 10 years. All of a sudden, all of these businesses, and you just heard Bryan and Aaron both describe it, we got to do it now. Now is our opportunity. So I think one of the things that I would say is just the businesses that are surviving and potentially even thriving are the ones that were willing to act. A lot of the businesses and a lot of clients some of the clients I was dealing with, we're going to wait and see what happens. Even with the higher education, the institutes, we're going to wait and see what happens. We're going to wait and see what our students want to do. And the businesses that were either had their technology ready to go, or to Bryan's example, could get it ready to go really quickly, you could act much faster. Global business has slowed down. When I talk about international, more people were focused on domestic. So you'll hear that we don't have nearly as many international students here anymore, because they couldn't travel because of the pandemic, and even the visas were drying up. So I think that's something that's going to be really slow to come back. The international business is going to be slow in exchange. If you are already in a country, I think you could go ahead and you can act. But if that was part of your expansion plan, I think that area has probably slowed down.
Yeah, that's interesting. And thinking back to what everyone said about, having to switch folks over from whatever you still were doing in person or pencil, paper, whatever. We went through the same thing. We had many thousands of students that we needed to switch over the course of a week. And just like all of you were saying, like you find a way to get it done. And it's not graceful, but it's needed. So I like the idea of EdTech having jumped forward 10 years, because I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Well, and Emily, I'd even say, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but I was working for Sylvan when eSylvan was a concept, and that was literally I'm going to go 18 to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it wasn't accepted then. It was not an accepted way of communicating, but who in this environment wouldn't want their child one-on-one with a teacher with 2 to 3 students? That is now such a huge benefit. And that's how far we jumped, right? 18 years ago, eSylvan probably started. 18, 20 years ago, eSylvan started. And now people would die to be able to be a Sylvan student.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'm lucky that my own children are Sylvan students, and I'm lucky. My kids get a lot of benefits that a lot of other families don't. And there's a lot of stress in households right now, as they're watching their kids struggle. So we'll get through it. Let's jump forward a little bit into question. Erin, I'm going to circle back over to you. How are you changing your financial plans for the business in 2021 in ways that were shaped by COVID or post-COVID expectations?
I have to laugh at these questions because they require a certain degree of vulnerability that
you don't have to give away the farm, Erin. It's okay.
It's okay. No, I think this is important, because this is, if we are really going to be here and try to uplift EdTech, then these are important conversations. And I think it is a very important question. There still is a degree of uncertainty that I'm experiencing, and I'm sure others are experiencing, into how far can you project, and how much is changing between now and then. And that makes for a different kind of leadership, both on the financial front and on the operations front. Our entire plan in March was just like, okay, let's rip this up and start over. I think that might have happened 70 or 80 more times in March.
Yeah.
And we realized that we just had to be nimble and agile to make our way through. And as we navigated the pivot, our financial plans and projections consistently changed. And I would say they still do. They still require a bit of revisiting, and they require some rehashing. What it ultimately has forced us to do is think through at a deeper level, who are we trying to serve? What problems can we solve? And how is their world expected to shift? And, there's this old adage of like, skate to where the puck is going. And we're doing our absolute best to not only project how education is going to change, but we're also looking at how the industry fiscally is going to evolve into different costs, different organization structures, and all of those things. Our objective now is to build out some different models of pro forma so that we can consistently tweak. But at some extent, especially with a very young team, we don't want to waste the resources consistently revisiting the plan. So it's a really unique space for us as a growing company to try to solve the problem of uncertainty is always present and we never know. and also build in our foundational base that allows us to be confident moving forward.
Oh, great. Thank you. Aimee, what trends do you see across? I know you've been keeping an eye on the EdTech space and what companies are doing. What trends are you seeing right now?
That's a great question. Related to investments, I think a lot of the investments are related to investing in your technology. And even we were having a little bit of a conversation before we kicked off, but Ed asked David Cross, how with Towson Incubator was going, and David's answer was, we've turned into the Towson Accelerator. And that's really investing that money and investing in the technology. I think the other thing that I've seen is investing in your people, making sure that your teams are okay. Your standard hours aren't the same anymore. The people investing even in people are starting to look at and think about my job. What does my job mean? How do I invest in myself? So how can my company help invest in myself? What does my business and what does my company look like on the other side of this pandemic? And you're seeing that across the board. You are seeing, especially in EdTech, you're seeing how do we accelerate our thoughts? And that's anything from, you see a lot of I guess I should pause and just talk about upskilling. All of your businesses are talking about upskilling. So you've got some EdTechs that are really focused on upskilling. And I think one of the unicorns in the market is the Guild Education, and I think they capture a lot of that. But you just even heard this week Coursera mentioned that they were going to probably look at an IPO early next year. I think the other thing I would say is you're seeing a lot of investment dollars in the market, and a lot of people are looking, where can I start to invest, because and what businesses can I invest in? Because when we come out of this, we want the technology ready. What do our business looks like coming out of this? Is our technology ready, and how do we start to accelerate? Here is a chance to put our customers first. I think that's the other thing that I would say is, even when you start to look at it, you're really starting to talk about personalization. When you start to talk about education online, my accounting class, it doesn't really matter where I take my accounting class. Accounting 101 is going to be accounting 101 is going to be accounting 101. So do I take it more affordable? Do I take it online? Do I go to a community college? Do I then transfer to post-secondary? How do I transfer those credentials? You're starting to see a lot more acceptance and benefit from your online education platforms. And so people are willing to invest the money there, and again, just accelerate. Right. Thanks.
Bryan, I think you've seen up close the kinds of investments that companies want to make. And so what have you learned in that experience? Why do you think that you were so appealing for LTG at this point in time?
It's a great question. I guess the heart of the question is, if you look at Baltimore's obviously been the heart of a lot of the core technologies for colleges and universities, which are the learning management system. You've got Blackboard, Moodle Room story. A lot of people have called it the Blackboard Mafia. All the people from Blackboard that left to do other businesses. Moodle Rooms had some ex-Blackboard talent like Lou Pugliasi, and we've got a lot of great stories in Baltimore around education technology. I would say probably the hottest scene still today, and it's certainly been that for a long time. And everybody knows Blackboard. Anybody that knows Moodle Rooms, Moodle, or Canvas even, which is one of the ones out there, knows that there's been no innovation at all in the LMS space for like about 20 years. It's monetized. No one's really doing anything new. There wasn't really, it was sort of a check the box mentality. Colleges, universities, they felt like they needed to just say, we have a learning management system, and they didn't care much about what it did as long as they could just say we have it. So I think investments right now are realizing that we're about to see a paradigm shift in the platform. And it wasn't just COVID that made them realize that. I think it was obviously massively accelerated by COVID, but I think we were starting to go there, and the conversations over the last couple of years for me behind the scenes were early stage signs that we were probably going to have another shift where people realized that there was becoming an opportunity again, because some of the companies that were out there, and Structure being one of them, were long in the tooth. They were purchased by private equity. They had to lay out a bunch of people off to try to get profitable. They weren't profitable. None of the companies that are the household names, with the exception of the small Moodle companies, are not really financially doing that well. They're kind of they're really ripe for disruption. I don't think there's ever been a time that the LMS has been as ripe for disruption, other than about, maybe about every 10 years, there's sort of a massive disruption. So I think people started to realize it. People were looking for what could we do, and they realized that a lot of industry shift to open source.
Yeah.
Right. You've got Linux. You've got the classic Android story on phones and picking up market share like crazy. A lot of reasons open source does really well. It's that competition between different providers offering different flavors of the open source.
Right.
Moodle has that. It has something called Totara, which is a flavor. Moodle Rooms had their own flavor before they were rebranded as OpenLMS, called Joule, for all of us here that remember those days in Baltimore EdTech. So it's sort of a good place to go if you want to innovate, is to go towards the open source technology, like we saw in Linux, or like we've seen with MySQL in the database sector. Open source technologies a lot of times can offer some really interesting options. And we were the largest Moodle partner in the world, and OpenLMS used to be when they were a Moodle partner, and that was the official partnership with the nonprofit. So you put us together, and now I was already the largest partner by about a factor of 4 or 5, and the OpenLMS team, ex-Moodle Rooms team, was a little bit than me in revenue. So you add those together, and now we're the largest partner by a factor of 10 now, and you get scale. And with scale comes innovation, and now with COVID comes people who want innovation, because for the first time in a while, your technology platform is not just to check the box, it becomes a differentiator. If everybody's online, well, how good is the technology you're using online? And I've seen Michael Chasen is back at it again with Class for Zoom. That's fascinating to me. He just came back at it, and it's the back end of that Moodle, where we're seeing some really interesting things there. But he's using Zoom, and now he's creating really cool technology on top of Zoom, and then he's using like a Moodle backend to do more basic LMS features. So that's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on. And you haven't seen that kind of innovation, but why are people coming back in to innovate on the LMS side? Is because I think that they realize that in every area, there's all these different places to kind of to go to, and that's what LTG was thinking is, wow, we can, and I can get into that more if you want later on, but they have all these different technologies they can wrap in and innovate again, and that's new. It got real hot over the last. I had a ton of different people reaching out to me over the last 12 months, so I could tell it was sort of a new paradigm shift for sure, different than a decade ago.
Are you seeing?
Emily, I think you're going to see, let me capitalize on something that Bryan said. I think you're going to see some businesses take on Zoom. So there's a new company called Engagely that was the founders of Coursera, who aren't involved in the business anymore, although I think they're on the board, or advisors at least. But they have just invested in looking at and trying to create a platform that will take on Zoom specifically for education purposes. And the founder observed her high school students doing other things. They were playing games, they were chatting with their friends, they were not participating as much as you'd want them to in their Zoom classrooms. So there's a place that technology it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with that company.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. I was wondering if any of the three of you can jump in. What feature sets do you think people are really hungry for in EdTech right now? Like, putting content aside, what features are really beneficial and in demand right now?
So for me, it's, I look at things as sort of social interaction. I don't think people want to sit on Zoom meetings all day. So, you look at just basic functionality that we have in this Zoom we're in right now, breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are so simple, but so genius. Small, but immediately forces collaboration. You can do them at, if you go into Zoom, you can do it at random, and we could break this whole group up into breakout rooms of 4. I use them in all sorts of interesting, unique ways. I was at I hosted one of my best friends' baby showers recently, and we did breakout rooms, and then all sorts of activities in breakout rooms. And then we had the timer going. We brought it back together, and people had to present for what happened in their breakout rooms. We're using breakout rooms in our company meetings all the time to do breakout rooms for different problems we're trying to solve, and then we come back together, and that's just a way of collaborating, right? So whether it's breakout rooms, whether it's there's different modules in technology that allow for collaboration. I think this idea of social learning is just getting started. I'll put this out there. My favorite educational platform is TikTok. And my friends like to make fun of me because I just am so obsessed by how much you can go on there and learn if you get, once the algorithm sort of figures out, assuming it's not a Chinese psyop or whatever, some people it might be, but
right.
But I just think it's incredible because you have these people that become experts in something and get sort of famous, and then they get followers, and then they want to share, and people are talking to them, and there's just a community built around different topics inside there. Some of it's just dance videos, but a lot of it's really incredible social collaboration for learning. So I think that that's probably a feature set that's still far below its potential. That could be in just about any type of technology that's being used in education right now.
Yeah.
Hey, Aaron, talk about gamification and how you're using it.
Yeah.
Sure. I think gamification is going to be a really interesting piece of this. Gamification for a lot of linguistics is usually meant to describe how to get someone to engage in content. But the way that we've tried to think about gamification is, can we make the experience of learning feel like a game? So the way we contrast it too is to think about, a game where you're playing like Tetris, and every time you score a line, there's a bit of information that's given to you, right? That's a game that gives you content. But I think there's a space available mostly around the engagement challenge that education companies are inevitably going to face here, where the game has to be the education itself. So this is almost project-based learning that somehow gets looped into technology that I think would be really special to build into. I also think that we're approaching something that's going to naturally open up, and that's going to be mixed media, where being on one screen and just having one instructor isn't going to be engaging enough, where we have to jump into like, hey, go watch this TikTok video, jump out, we're going to go experience this, we're going to jump here. And what this really means as far as a larger picture is that training and PD is going to be a whole new era of EdTech, right? How do you simply deliver experiences to kids without a large amount of training? So I think that's going to be a new space. And then the last thing I wrote down, just to kind of continue to extrapolate, is I'm really hopeful, and this is sort of like me thinking really far ahead, but I'm really hopeful that this also calls us to think about the content that we're giving to the young adults when they have access to the entire world, but they're learning through what can be very old content. It calls all of us as educators to think about what we're delivering and how relevant it is. And if you've talked with a 14 or 15-year-old lately, you're probably hearing like, why? And I'm hoping that it calls us to evolve through gamification, through new media, like mixing in new ways of digesting information that changes all of this stuff. I'm excited.
Aimee, did you have any follow-ups for Aaron?
No, that's exactly wanted him to talk about that. I think the other place that some of the features is, and I might be extending features a little bit here, is, but where do you start to see cross intersections in education? Like, and I'll give you an example. I think mental health is going to be, and I'm going to go off of personalized experience. I think you're going to continue to see investment in personalized experience in a lot of regards, whether that's with how you're engaging with your student. But I think especially in the post-secondary business, you're going to start to see mental health and teletherapy is going to is something that no one's figured out yet. There's a couple different businesses that are looking at it and have been in that business, but I think it's really going to accelerate, and I think you're going to see a lot of dollars go that way. So a feature is going to be the mental health. I also think assessment. I don't think we've figured it out yet. How are we going to start to assess these students that have very vast different experiences? You've got private schools that are probably able to have stepped up to this a little bit better. They were in better shape. They had more money invested in technology. But then you look at the public school system. How are you going to assess the kids that have had the stay-at-home mom? And we could bridge into a conversation of who has exited the workforce, and maybe we'll head that way. But the children that have had stay-at-home moms that are able to sit there, and especially in the K-12 business, even the K to 6, I guess I would say K to 5, K to 6, where you've been able to keep your student online versus students that just do not have that parental support, do not have that support at home. Where is the assessment going to come in? What features of assessment are going to come into place? So this isn't going to be a question of catching your student up. That conversation stopped this summer. Yep. This is going to be, where are you in your education spectrum, and how do we meet you where you are? And I think you're going to start to see more and more tools go that direction.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And it's something that we've talked about in the education team at Sylvan too, because, we place the students using a standardized test that millions of students use in lots of school districts across the country. And usually it's a wonderful tool for us for placement and to measure growth. But now the old norming populations are kind of meaningless, because we're now measuring students in 2019, 2020, and 2021 who've had a giant disruption to their education, and we're norming them against populations that didn't have that experience. So what's the true test of what these children should know when? That's all different now, and we don't know where we're going to land yet to then build new norms upon that foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was good. Yeah. You go ahead, Aaron.
No, man. You look excited.
I was so excited. This just got fun, didn't it? Like, wow, I just got chills. Did you feel the same thing? I was like, oh, these are the good topics.
Yeah.
Well, I love the personalized learning point. It gets me excited. One thing we've seen in the learning management system, LMS, which has been, the core of what I like to call the e-learning ecosystem, all the different products that sort of fit together. You might have one, you might have the other, they might talk to each other, you might have 5 that we like to talk a lot about. There's this new concept called the LXP. I don't know how many people are familiar with the learning experience platform. And first, when I heard it, I thought, isn't it just like an LMS? Maybe a little bit better. Like, are they making it a new category? And what's up with all these acronyms? And I've come to learn that it is really a new category, because I think that an LMS almost needs to be rethought from the ground up. And that's where LXPs come. And there's about 10 companies that are doing it really, really well. LTG, that just acquired us, has a product called Instilled, which is their LXP. And what an LXP is interesting, what makes it interesting to me, is I think it has the possibility of providing what you're talking about, which is sort of a click-to-once, configurable, personalized experience depending on what you would like to achieve. And in case of mental health, what you'd be able to do is pick. It would be Netflix style type learning, where you get to not just pick what you want to be there, but it would start to have an algorithm that would figure out what other people are doing that are having whatever you're focusing your attention on for that experience in. So it's learning well, and it says, okay, we're having better outcomes for people who are being assessed and saying they feel better here at the end of the 3-week program if they do these 5 things instead of these 8 things. So that whole concept of being able to come in and say, I would like to create a learning experience. I would like to have an assessment. I would like to have content from a company called Go1. And plus I would like 3 pieces of content from a company called Open Sesame. There's not getting this sort of plug and play.
Yeah.
Best of breed, pulling what you need, but create an experience over all the different products, because we all know there's a million products out there in the ed tech space right now. It's overwhelming. It's been an explosion over the last couple of years, and COVID about to make it probably even crazier.
Yeah.
So you need a place to kind of create and customize the actual experience that can be, picking and choosing from all the different things. And it might be, a bunch of different companies that are here today that pull into that, plus, content. It's kind of an exciting time because the LXPs, I think, are about to take off for personalized learning.
That's great. That's really, it's really interesting to think about because we've done personalized learning for a long time.
Yep.
And we have a proprietary LMS, which was, we've talked about it. Yeah.
Yep.
And it served a purpose very, very well. But I think like all companies are seeing things are evolving really quickly, and we have to figure out what's the best way to keep up. Do we continue to make things ourselves? Do we collaborate? Do we farm out things that we don't want to be our expertise area? There are a lot of decisions I think people are having to make really quickly right now. And I can't wait to see what happens on the other side.
That's fascinating. I mean, that's one of the reasons I was excited about doing the acquisition with LTG is that they have about 40 programmers that just customize the core code with different, people come in and say, like Moodle, but we want to do this really unique platform. And then they on a project team and they make their own sort of custom LMS around Moodle. We could, as you know, from previous experiences, that was never really our focus. We picked our niche was keeping it standard core and just did great services around it. Now we can do both, which is giving us a whole different trajectory, which I'm very excited about.
That is exciting. All right, Aaron, did you had something you wanted to add? I think I don't want to forget you.
Well,
yeah, what's up?
I appreciate that. I think Bryan hit just the biggest nail on the head. The experience. I was like having this thought the other day that spiraled into like 20 minutes of being completely lost, which I love to be able to do. But this is probably the first time that education has had to compete for attention the way it has. When a student at home has all of their available options and education is one of them, it's a totally different game, right? We're almost forcing them to say, hey, out of the 17 options, you have video games, TikTok, social media, outside, play, friends, family, dinner. We want you to choose school. And that competition, I'm excited for because it will naturally create a very strong, tempered educational shift. And to Bryan's point, this idea that education could become experiential, whether it be on a screen or in classes, using technology differently, has been a screaming hole for the last 15 years, if not longer. And I'm really optimistic. I like to live like glass is always full, but this seems like a great time in the history of education to completely assess and then reevaluate what is most important for someone to choose education, not to be forced to sit down and slapped on the wrist, but to like willingly and subjectively say, this is the best thing for me, which is really exciting.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I'm, seeing firsthand the competition for attention between education and other maybe more fun things in my own house has been really interesting. And my kids are in public school. I love public school. I'm always a huge fan of public school, but my one complaint, and I think this is probably true about a lot of school districts across the country, is that they went into this disruption trying to make a virtual version of a regular school day. And that is not the best choice. It's just not, because it's not a regular school day. 7-year-olds should not be on Google Meet for 6 or 7 hours a day. I'm having to coach my kids through things on how to answer multiple choice questions about line dancing as their gym lesson. It's very hard to say, this is important to your future. No, it's not. And so.
And Emily, to be fair, it's not even cool to ask adults to do that. Like
I know, right? Yeah, I had a 7-hour Zoom a couple weeks ago. It almost broke me as a person. And they have to do it every day. So I think education has always been a few years behind the business world when it comes to innovation and being able to change and adapt. And we like our agrarian calendar, and we like our bell schedule, and it's really hard to shoehorn things in there. And I think one of the big silver linings of this disruption is that people are finally realizing it's time. It's time.
That's amazing. Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
Bravo. That was like the best thing said. I just think that's brilliant. There's like, as I was realizing, that I was going to be here tonight, I was writing down a couple of things I thought were the biggest trends, and that was in my top 4. This idea that every person I talk to every day has a, my team at eThink, everybody's got kids running around, jumping in out of the Zoom.
Oh yeah.
It's become really fun. It's like, hey, come on in and say hi and everything. But then they're going back and they're telling you about, what they're learning. And I always want to ask questions because it's all interesting. And but the one thing I realized is exactly what you said. Line dancing is probably the best example you could give, is that we're finding that for the first time, parents are realizing we're teaching our kids the wrong things.
Yeah.
The biggest, most interesting thing right now is alternative pathways to actually getting what they should be learning. I mean, I think that it's proving that the education content that we're giving our children is far off from what really are going to need for them. And it's for the first time, I think, access to different pathways that are not in your traditional school, where you can say, you know what, I don't even know if I want to send my student back to public school because I've got these 4 alternative pathways that can all be done virtually, no different.
Right.
And now it's opening the room up for alternative pathways, different types of content, innovation in the way we're delivering that content on different platforms. You're not tied to whatever school is in the middle of Oklahoma, if that's where you. And for the first time, it's maybe more interesting to think, well, what if I didn't send my student to this public school, but I let them take these 4 online, interesting pod cohorts that, some working on in some homeschooling model right now in their EdTech startup. That is mind blowing when you think about it, because we've had that problem for so long where kids are bored at this age, right? And this, where they're so used to having access to all this cool stuff like TikTok and YouTube and all this in a classroom, and they just go crazy because they don't feel like they're being challenged, and they could, it's such an interesting time. I'm just absolutely blown away by the amount of opportunity that exists because of things like you just said. So that was like absolutely perfect. And maybe the most interesting topic of COVID is just seeing what firsthand what kids are really learning right now. It's fascinating.
It is. It's something. And I never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I'm thinking about homeschooling for the first time ever.
Absolutely.
And I was a public school teacher, and I never thought I would say that, but I have one son who has learning needs, and remote school is killing him. And if he comes out hating school at the end of this year, then we've lost. So the time is jump in and save him.
Emily, I think one of the things you're also going to start to see is just learning specifically what you need. You're going to have a lot more conversations, and I'm going to pass this to Aaron because I want him to talk about his business and what he's focusing on. But it's credentialing, micro-credentialing, your boot camps. You're going to start to see additional value here. Kaplan just announced that career services. So even coming out of your college, do you have the PowerPoint skills, the Excel skills? Do you have the public speaking skills, the presentation skills? Do you have the leadership? You're going to start to see a lot more in soft skills. And do you have the leadership skills? And have your institutions, regardless of what age you are, taught what you need versus some of the academics that we've seen in the past. And Aaron, go ahead. And I really want you to talk about your core product here, because I think this is just an amazing thing that students of all ages need. I'm going to let you talk because you're going to explain it much better than I am, but I'm a big fan.
I guess I will. Also, we're like Scottie Pippen and Jordan. I'm so grateful for all these assists you're throwing my way. This is amazing. Well, I think the major overarching point here is that resonance is going to be the most important thing, right? A kid has to resonate with the material. And I made this statement one time on a podcast, and the guy almost fell out of his chair. I said, education for the last several years has been a train to the past. And it's really important that we start triangulating what kids are learning into where industry is going, where entrepreneurship is going, right? So that what they're learning now in 5th grade in 13 years is still relevant. And that's a big challenge with the way things are moving.
Yeah.
And what we do is bridge this gap of social emotional learning which is all about emotions, management, communication, self-identification, right? Those are really big themes that belong in this wellness category. We're also fusing that with understanding money. And the reason that feels like such an amazing calling for me and purpose for me right now is that money is an underbelly and underpinning for all of the other dialogues that are going to happen as to why someone goes to college, why someone goes into a trade, which are vastly underrated, why someone doesn't go to college, why someone buys a car. It's clearly why we do so many things. It's the motivator. And beneath that is all emotion. And if we really look at the science, it's clear that we are watching pain points of spending being distanced. So it takes way fewer seconds to make a spending choice and way longer to ever get that bill. And with digital currency changing, these kids can make spending choices on their phone in 3 clicks. And I think we are going to watch the need for college, for trades, for vocations, for jobs, for internships, to start to consider that if a student doesn't understand money, they will not stay in that position very long because it will force their ecosystem out. And our job is to look at what can we infuse into the education system now so that in 5 years, when they're like, I gotta go into debt, they understand the ramifications of that so that the rest of their life, the other education has actually served them, which is another big challenge.
Yeah. Aaron, I was thinking, if financial education is kind of loosely correlated with STEM, with the M in STEM, but I wouldn't put it as a traditional STEM topic. But I think the two areas are kind of in the same boat, where like schools know they need to teach these things. They know they're important. They have not made time in the school day to do this, and so they're kind of like adding it on at the end, like clubs after school, or maybe a weekend thing, or the PTA brings in someone, and the students are missing these critical skills. As you're saying, they're going to need them to be successful. So what are some inroads you've seen into incorporating some of these? They're not newer skills, but some of these skills where people have finally wised up and said, oh, we should probably add a big chunk of this into the day. What are you seeing that's moving in a positive direction?
Phenomenal question. The efforts that we've seen, even at a light scale, are to infuse the conversation of money with almost anything. I mean, there's a plethora of options to do this. If you think about science, right? You can think about what it takes to fund the mission to the moon, rather than just how do we propel the rocket. There are so many ways to take even the idea of career identification into this. There's ways to isolate mathematics, geometry in a very simple way, but to point it to, okay, why does the carpenter, why is he cutting this angle, right? What does that extra piece of wood allow him to create? And at a very rudimentary level, I think the problem exists in almost intentionally ignoring that money is such a pervasive part of our culture. And it gives us a great leverage point to insert it in, even subtly, to talk about why it matters. And if there is to ever be an awakening that we've failed to let adults build financial acumen, it is COVID, right? It is 100% the last 9 months. It is not like any other recession we've ever experienced, but it is so simple. I realize that I'm inserting a word that could be very triggering for someone to think that inserting something into an education system like this would be easy. I do not mean easy. I mean, it's simple to find examples of how money translates into any subject anywhere, because it is a function of how that subject grows, expands, changes, incorporates technology. Bryan's a great example. A huge investment was made, and there is a reason for that, right? And we're going to discuss that, and we talk about why that matters. But the same could be said about why we're having a student understand geometry, right? Why does this matter? Why does money permeate this subject just like it does somewhere else? And I think that's an opportunity for us.
Emily, do you see the 2 questions in the chat?
I do. I saw the first one, and the question was about writing in this environment. And I love that question. I was a writing teacher and I have my master's in writing. So like writing's my baby. I love it. But if the panelists don't mind, we actually have Sylvan's writing expert here in the audience. I might call on her to answer if she doesn't mind. Rhonda, would you mind contributing?
Do it, do it.
Come on, Rhonda.
Rhonda.
Hello, everybody. Writing is probably one of the toughest things to do online, aside from teaching. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and now we lost you. Bad timing. Oh, we lost her altogether. She's not even on the list anymore.
Yeah,
All right.
she'll come back in, Emily.
She'll come back.
The other thing, not only about writing, and I'm not going to cover what Rhonda's going to say because she's going to say something absolutely brilliant. But I think the other thing that I would say, and she just came back, but the one thing that I would say is physical writing. I don't think you're going to start to see that as much. I think we're using keyboards, and I think, going on to features, you're going to use voice technology. And so I don't think the younger kids right now are going to write as much, but I think we have Rhonda back. Rhonda, you still, there she is.
Yay.
So I only caught the last bit of what you said because yay, internet. So yes, we're definitely seeing a drop in handwritten materials and actual letter formation, and we're seeing much more digital writing, which has its pluses and minuses. For the kids who are proficient keyboarders, that's actually a better way to produce, because students will then be more encouraged to spend more time, and they have more stamina writing when they're writing in a digital environment. So the question is, how are we going to train our littles in keyboarding so that it's an automatic process and they're not spending their brain time hunting for an H, when we really want them to spend their brain time formulating ideas that they can communicate with others. So I don't think that handwriting is going to go by the wayside, but I think that the emphasis is we're going to see a greater shift to teaching kids younger and younger to write digitally.
Yeah. One thing that we've seen, I know it drives Rhonda and I crazy, is that we do have parents who come to us and say, we want them to handwrite everything. We want them to revise. We want them to edit. Like, everything is pencil paper. And you have this poor high school kid who has a 5-page paper that they have to rewrite, 10 times because mom and dad don't want them to use Microsoft Word. And I think they're just doing the child a huge disservice because they're denying them tools so that, like Rhonda was saying, don't spend your energy on the muscles in your fingers, spend the energy on composing a good piece of writing. And I feel like that's a struggle that's been going on for a long time, at least for us. Rhonda, would you agree?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
It's been going on as long as I've been working in education. There's been a struggle between we need to handwrite everything and then make, the next draft has to be another start from the beginning and copy it all over with the changes, and then copy it all over with the changes. And that's just not doing anybody any favors.
No.
Well, I think the other thing I would say is kids are learning so much faster. There's so much evidence out there on kids learning so much faster. And, I have a 12-year-old at home, and the thought of erasing something on a piece of paper and rewriting it absolutely destroys him. Versus if he's typing and he's got his mind going, he can drop his next sentence in a technical format, as opposed to handwriting it. And it's a huge difference for him. It's a success versus tears and wailing and fighting to get homework done.
For sure. Yeah. And we got to work on the parents a little bit, I think. Not you, obviously, but globally we do.
The parents who want their kids to learn just the way they did.
We see that a lot. We do. All right, I'm getting the 5-minute warning for the panel discussion. So I see there was one more question, maybe two, but definitely one more, about how to teach critical thinking skills in this new environment. And I think that is an excellent question. And I think, Erin, your product especially lends itself well to students really analyzing what's in front of them and making a good choice about it. So I'm going to kick off with you.
I appreciate that. That is a tremendous compliment. So thank you. Thank you very much. So to somewhat brackishly answer that question, the way that we assess critical thinking is we provide them opportunity to critically think. And we have to understand that that's almost boundary-less compared to some of the other assessment formats that we've had. One of the challenges in working with young adults, if we want them to to do very well, we also have to allow them to fail. And I think that critical thinking has been seen in many ways as like a binary response. Either they critically think or they don't. And critical thinking is a muscle like anything else. You got to go to the gym and work it out.
Yeah.
And what we've incorporated into our entire engine is, can we guide someone through steps 1, 2, 3, 4 and ask them to complete through 10? And we have to almost support the fact that they may only get to 6, but that's how you build the muscle. And in context of money in particular, we've got a lot of width, because we can go into any subject or any particular field and say, you know, what do you think this is going to lead to? Or what do you think is going to happen? Or pitch us this product, or what brands do you associate with and why? And allowing them to make these neural connections is really critical, especially young. But my opinion is that the objective of critical thinking skills assessments is almost backwards to the objective. If someone is critically thinking, they should figure out that it's an assessment, and probably do. And we almost need to provide a bit more open format. I love, Aimee mentioned, like, submit a voice response, right? Submit a reflection. We do a lot of reflections, like very open-ended. And that means that we spend a lot more time combing through those, but it also means that they have a chance to really craft a response that is theirs and they own it. And we support that with some kind of reinforcement that says, hey, great thought, not you got it right.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's very good. Bryan, I have a similar question. I'm going to pose it 2 different ways, and you pick the one you want to answer. How about that?
That's great.
So the first is, when clients come to you and they want a customized Moodle solution, how do you help them think critically through that process so that they do, you know, if they come to you not knowing exactly what they want, how do you walk them through to get them to the best solution? Or how do you help your clients pick the best tools in Moodle to spark critical thinking in their learners?
Great questions. I think I'm going to go with the first one. They're both great. We are, I have a business partner that runs the services side of things. She's the COO, and I'm terrified of her. I've known her for 20 years. The entire sales team is terrified of her. If the sales team doesn't get it exactly right and hand it over to them to where they've identified those needs, they'll learn that lesson once, and then they'll never make that mistake again. So the way we've solved for that problem is every single demo has someone from the services team that will be their solutions engineer on the demo doing a needs assessment. So it's a pretty extensive process, because when the deal signs, they go right into the discovery phase. That's sort of an extension of that process. So that's how we do it. We do it through, I would say, you know, just extremely diligent needs assessment. And from there, when they're doing the implementation, they've looked at everything in that needs assessment. And with an open source platform, you get tremendous flexibility. And we have the ability to rely on hundreds of clients that are probably we have probably in most cases similar niches. We may have 10 clients in a alternative pathway niche, and we might say, hey, this really works great. Here's an example. Would you like to talk to this client of ours? And we get permission, and then they make sure it's really what they want and it really fits needs. It does happen that they get in, and sometimes depending on the situation, they might say, well, that's not really what I realized. And a lot of times, you know, usually I find it's more on the side, because we're so diligent about it. I find it might be the client that maybe made a quick decision, didn't take the assessment process as serious. But that's how we do it at eThink. It's very, very, very hands-on customer service to make that happen.
All right, that's great.
Yeah, we have a 98% retainment of our clients over 13 years. So once we get somebody in, it's
fabulous.
It's recurring revenue. So as you guys can imagine, that's made us relatively appealing for that reason.
Yes.
Once we get a client in, average is probably 10, 11 years at least. We've only been in business 13. So, it's pretty much everyone comes in, stays. So it's been because of that approach that we, if we didn't get it right, they would leave and say, that wasn't what I signed up for.
Right.
Those the tools I needed. So yeah, that's how we do it. We put a lot of money up front, but we're able to do that and take a loss sometimes in the first year, sometimes, more, almost all the time. Because we've got a tail of so much recurring revenue. We'd rather get it right and keep 10 years than get it wrong and have a bad, a bad success record out there for clients to not give us great recommendations. But we take a lot of pride. If you go out to like G2, for example, we have the highest score out there right now. I think we're a 4.9 on G2, which is, I think it's the highest rated LMS service provider right now there is. And it's, something we are absolutely, obsessive about, to say the least. So we do it.
That's great. Yeah. 98%, impressive.
Yeah, 98%.
Yeah, not many companies can say that. That's really awesome.
Yeah, I'm proud of that one. Yeah, wouldn't mind 100, but we'll take 98.
Yeah. If you must. Yeah.
If we must, yeah.
So Aimee, any last thoughts on trends you're seeing in instruction of critical thinking or tools for critical thinking? And then after that, we're going to move to open Q&A.
That's a great question, and I don't know that I have a great answer for you. You know what, Emily? I don't have a great answer for you. I think I go back to really the assessments and how are we going to start to assess this, and then I think it's the analytical thinking. But I probably do not. I'm trying to think of a company that's really focused on it, and I don't have a great answer for it. It's one thing during this pandemic that I recommend for everybody is taking that time to just think about things like this, like what is going to be needed on the opposite side, and so that's really something that needs to be solved.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, this goes back to the, agrarian calendar concept where the focus has been for hundreds of years, like, what do you know, not what does it mean? And those are two very different things. So that's one area I would love to see open up in the future. All right, with that, I'm going to open up the floor to our attendees, and we can have at it with the questions.
I'll ask the first question, talking about opening things up from the agriculture-based calendar. What do you think about time of day of education, especially for teenagers?
I have thoughts, but I'm going to defer to the panelists.
Well, I have a teenager, so I'll answer really quickly. A later start is a fantastic situation for the teenagers that need to sleep in. The other thing that I've seen working is, and this will go back to Emily's point of I can't handle 7 classes in 7 hours in a single day. My teenager has 4 classes in a day, and I think that's been actually my teenager and my preteen have 4 classes a day. So they are only catering to those 4 classes. They are not having 7. They only have homework. Those classes meet every other day. So their homework is for every other day. So those are some of the things that I've seen working for the teenagers. And also it's interesting. Their classes are done by 2:30, which is not what has been done in the past. Their day is much shorter, and their breaks are scheduled. So Emily, let me pass to you.
I would say pre-COVID that I know everything kind of deferred to the bus system, but I do think that high schoolers it was a mistake to have them be the earliest to go, I think this is a nationwide thing where they have to be at school by 7, they eat lunch at like 10:30, and they're home by 1:30 or 2. And research says that is not the time where they're even really very awake. And then meanwhile, we know that our littles burn out towards the afternoon, and having them go the latest in the day, also not great for, from a child development perspective. So I would say pre-COVID, I would love to see that change. And I really liked what I heard from you about, shorter days, homework for every other day. I think that's much more appropriate than unfortunately what I'm seeing in my school. Because they're cranking forward like there is no difference, and it's a grind for sure. Anybody else want to add their thoughts to that one?
I think it's interesting that the way it's structured is almost for the slowest student, as opposed to allowing kids to learn at their own speed. So if you grasp a subject really easily, you could get way ahead. You're not held up by the rest of the class. And different project learning based things and out of school time things, you see this going, but in the classic school system, you don't see very much of it because the nature of classrooms and teachers and no child left behind. But we have an opportunity to do it differently.
Yeah. We have an opportunity to do a lot of things differently right now. It's kind of exciting. Next question.
Well, Emily, I'll jump in here real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested to hear, and I'm going to say this, and I wrote a message thing and I hadn't said it yet. I think this has been one of the most interesting, fascinating discussions that we've had over the last 4 years of doing POE. So I just really want to thank everybody on the panel for their insights. I think it's been fascinating. So my question to you and the panelists is, I work for a university. We're trying to support innovation and startups and entrepreneurship. So from a panel's perspective, what needs to be done in the ecosystem to encourage more innovation, more entrepreneurship in the ed tech space? So any thoughts that you have, what government might need to do, or what universities can do, or what the other private sector, nonprofit sector can do? Just thoughts out there. I would appreciate it.
Take a shot at that one, I suppose. I've had a pretty good week when it comes to entrepreneur, I'd say. So I go ahead and take that a shot at that one. I think the most important thing right now is addressing the right problems. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs have great ideas. But I think there are other education entrepreneurs that sometimes I think find something that's really unique and interesting, but it's probably not going to scale. And it's probably maybe going to be a nice little, project, but it might not ever make it to a real business. And that's very, very challenging in ed tech. So I think that the number one thing is figuring out what problem you want to solve, and then battle testing that that's a problem that everybody has. So right off the bat right now, number one problem that comes to my mind is homeschooling. If you can't tell, the homeschooling has got to be the biggest opportunity in the world right now. And all the different things that, opportunities, what makes homeschooling better? Well, you have access to maybe the best teachers in the world. And obviously we have some examples like that with Coursera and a lot of those out there that have started to scale, but there's tremendous opportunities to find a little niche in that specific segment right now. That's incredibly appealing to me. If I was an entrepreneur, I'd probably go number two, the types of content that are in alternative pathways. And I think that, quite frankly, Aaron, you're on to exactly a great idea, which is financial literacy. It's missing in the schools. It doesn't have a great track record of being taught properly in the schools at all. Everyone leaves just not even knowing. I've got people in my company that are asking me how to invest in Robinhood, and we all know Robinhood's taken off this year, and they don't really know, even in their mid-20s, and they don't even know what a stock really is, and that's terrifying. And I think that what we're learning, but also the homeschooling, are two areas that if I'd see an entrepreneur and they were doing that, I'd want to do that. And then I guess the other thing I would say is, I don't think it's about government getting involved. I don't think it's about, I think it goes back to something that Emily and I know very well, because we met each other back in incubator days.
Yep.
I think that the incubator that Towson is doing, and incubators in there, and as a whole, are extremely valuable, and government backing on those, I suppose you could see government backing being helpful, but a robust community, right? There's some communities that have come and gone in Baltimore for ed tech, and this is another great one. But this was a question that I know, Emily, you shot over to me, so I'll answer that and say that the support when you have a great idea, but you've never done this before, which was me, when I entered Baltimore about 6 years ago, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that support. That's where I met Tim Hodge, who became my lawyer on this deal at Nelson Mullins. And that is where I met Jen Myers, who was the leader of that. And there wasn't day that she wasn't thinking about me, when someone came in who was either an investor in EdTech,
Yeah.
there were plenty of them. That's where I met Frank Bonzel, who I was here, but obviously he's well known in this group. That's where I met the former CEO of Sylvan. He came in one day. What was his name?
Oh, he's still the CEO, John McAuliffe.
Okay, yeah, he came. He came. Who
Yeah.
was the CEO before that? Was it
Oh, Jeff Cohen.
Jeff? It was Jeff. It was
Yeah.
Jeff. It was Jeff who went up to Catapult or something, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Jeff came and tapped me on the shoulder. I knew who Jeff was from an article. Jen tapped me on the shoulder and turned around and he wanted to talk about my business. And I thought that was so cool because I only had people in my business. And why would he want to talk to me? And he talked for not just a little while, he talked for like an hour, and he gave me so many great ideas, and I'll never forget it. Another day, she taps me on the shoulder, and there's the mayor's there, and she wants me to introduce me to the mayor. And to me, that's what an entrepreneur needs. They need a great idea, but then they need it battle tested by people like Jeff, who are like, well, have you thought about this? Or there's just so many. Larry Rivets is a guy who talked a lot to me. Another great guy, Green Academy. And there's a list of EdTech entrepreneurs, Saad, who reached out to me today, who obviously everybody knows from SiteLighter and knows really well. We had a little group of EdTech people. Burke was from
Straighter Line.
Straighter Line. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was a guy who would stop in and out. Moodle Rooms people, and it gave you kind of like a, hey, I could get this done. They got it done mentality. And then you'd be walking, when you're in those incubators, or EdTech incubators, you're walking to the coffee machine and you walk back with an idea. And that happened all the time. Not just an idea, a game changer. One day I was getting coffee and Lee from SiteLighter said, oh, we're using this group of programmers over in Romania.
Yeah.
Who are you using? Oh, I've got this group, this guy in Singapore, he's charging me this much. Oh, I've got a group that's charging you $30 an hour and they're phenomenal. And let me get an introduction. And by the time I got back to my desk, I'd say 60% on 70% on my programming.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. So you need around you that are supportive. And I think the incubators are the best way to do it. I was Emily, that's where we first met back in the day when SiteLighter was grinding, would agree with me.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Sylvan now uses the same Romanians.
They're great.
They're great. I know. If anybody wants their information, I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, they're great.
Dave, let me also jump in. I think, and this is where I think you guys have also, you're headed down. Build versus buy. Where like the businesses of 10 years ago were trying to do it all, like soup to nuts, and they were trying to home grow everything. And I think really right now is, where is your sweet spot? What are you focused on? And how are you surrounding yourself with people, either people or technology that someone else is investing in? So do I need to build it, or what do I need to buy from someone else?
Yep.
The other place that I take this, especially from a university perspective, is what careers are coming. And you use companies such as Burning Glass, which is analyzing the jobs of the future and really working with universities, working with state governments to say, here's what the jobs of the future are. So here's what I need to be educating. Here's the education that I need to be providing, whether that's boot camps, whether that's credentialing, whether that's four-year degrees or graduate degrees. I think it's, what am I going to learn, and then how do I apply it to my future? And I think that's a place where entrepreneurs really need to focus as well.
Can I add to this? Because we've just like pummeled this question.
Yeah,
go.
David, I appreciate you asking, and it's good to see you, man. I think the university has an opportunity to extend the normal ratio that like a hedge fund takes, right? Where they're like, well, 1 in 10 and we're good. I think a university has an opportunity to go 1 in 30, 1 in 40. And some of that comes down to funding, right? Especially as the money guy here, like I think the university has to fund, even if that's lunch for some kids to come in and learn about entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship now is cool. It's like being a professional athlete. So you're already getting the interest, but that funding could also be for salaries for people to help and support and show up, to Bryan's point. I'm the junior in both, like in all of the experiences here. So I recognize that my hubris is probably obvious, but I think that entrepreneurs in many ways need a very simple spark, and it doesn't actually cost a lot to fund new initiatives, even though you're going to go 1 in 30. And I get phone calls every like 4 days from my university asking for some thumbs up, right? And I would much rather support a direct entrepreneur venture for $500 than an overarching fund, because I know that in $500, especially as a college student, one, that's like $1 million, but two, the traction that they're going to get is less important than the traction they'll learn about by going that path. And I think universities have an opportunity in the next 5 years to allow entrepreneurs to try and fail. And ultimately they'll benefit from the branding of that. It's like asking the ROI of social media, right? It's very hard to track, but ultimately it plays into the overarching scheme of the university attracting the right attention.
No, that's really good. I'm excited for where the future is going to take us, and I think it's going to take us there a lot faster than any of us thought we would go. I feel like I want to say thanks COVID, but not really. Yeah. Is there anything else before we wrap up? Got a lot of good panelists here if you want to ask them questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
I come from a different background. I'm coming from more of a real estate background, but Baltimore is known for their eds, feds, and meds.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you guys think going forward outside of COVID, how your office space will work and how you see like your competition on how that grows. Whether most of you had said right now you're in co-working space and stuff like that with maybe cubes and stuff like in that area. Do you see that as an open area even moving forward, or staying a little bit more home office? Can you just expand on that kind of area?
Yeah, I love these topics. I'll keep on chatting about them all night. This is great stuff. I think it's super fascinating. I actually left the incubator that we were in when COVID happened because we wanted to try to get resilient. As I was saying earlier, I found some really interesting things when that happened in terms of, especially being an entrepreneur. I was lucky because I was at that stage at the 5-year and change mark. So I had a well-established team. We could integrate people in, and we were already half remote, half face-to-face. Had it not been for that, it would have been a lot harder. But I learned that what I didn't realize I had a split culture. I had the remote culture, and then I had the people that came in face-to-face. And what I didn't realize was happening was that the face-to-face people were being resented by the remote people a little bit, because we would have some, pizza or some food or drinks, and everybody like, oh, it must be nice getting to see people, and it's like, well, you live in Iowa and you live in, Illinois. It's not my fault. I'd love to have you in here, but it was a problem. And what ended up happening was when we got unified in a full remote culture, it elevated the culture very significantly, and everybody felt unified, and we found new ways to get innovative in the way we interacted. Slack was the first thing we did. We already had Slack, but I would say we're already relying on it, but my God, was it valuable in terms of culture. Everybody feels connected. And then you start to realize that you can actually have better culture remotely than you can face-to-face, because you can respect people's time boundaries, and you can create ways of tracking things differently, like the educational things we're doing internally. You can do all sorts of things that maybe you couldn't do before. And there's a lot of different things that we did. I'll give you one other example. We did a job swap remotely, so that everybody who are in different departments was strategically paired. We have about 40 people. So if somebody didn't understand why they were writing blog content on the services side, we put them and pair them with a marketing person so they could learn exactly how many hits their content was getting, so they could see the value of their work and realize what that did in terms of money, to get back to Aaron's point, so they could really make that connection of what was driving in terms of revenue. So it offered us, I could keep on going, the list of things that we had to innovate around culture. And what we tried to do was break down silos, even more so remotely. What was fascinating is it was easier to do it remote than it was face-to-face. We were more efficient, we were more tactical. And so I would say, if I was starting a brand new business and I didn't have connections and I didn't know a lot of great people to build my team immediately, which Most people don't at first if they're early in their career. I would now, but I certainly did not then. Then it was a crapshoot, and I was finding and learning, and I would have to find an incubator. I would think I would have to be connected to some type of a space. So I think it depends on where you are in your career and how many people you know. But I hope that those environments don't disappear, or if they start to, maybe we need virtual incubators where you have some EdTech virtual incubation area. Maybe that's the next good idea in the EdTech space, is to have sort of a remote, EdTech club or something, because I don't see how you could really come in with this great idea in education, think you're going to take on the world, and then not have people around you that have done all sorts of other EdTech businesses. I don't think you can be successful personally if you've never done it before. If you've done it before, it's a different story.
Hey, Brian, let me get some clarity. Is your company fully online now? Like fully virtual?
100% virtual, and it's 100% remote culture. We don't have an office any longer, and it works fantastic. And same with what's amazing is LTG. LTG is about 900 people. We're now 140 people with the Open LMS division, fully remote, teams all over the world, working fantastic. It works great, and you find new tools and new ways to innovate. It's very fascinating. It works better almost than face-to-face cultures.
Yeah, probably not what someone in real estate would want to hear, I guess.
Right.
Right.
I'm sorry, Brian, that wasn't the right answer.
Real estate's different.
Yeah.
Real estate's different.
Well, yeah, I have a little bit of a different answer, only because Sylvan's been around for 40 years, and we've had a presence in Baltimore for over 20. And we have an office space right now for about 100 people in Hunt Valley. And I would say, 100 people total, probably had 20, 30 who are remote almost all the time. And as much as our fearless leader liked to say he was cool with people working from home, he's old school. So he really tried. So now he had no choice. Like, we all had to be home, and we did really, really well. Very proud of us. Like, big pat on the back for us, everything we were able to accomplish. But we've had a couple meetings about what do we do now? Like, do we go back to the old office space? We're locked into at least for a while, so that this is a years down the road decision. But we started talking about it, and we're thinking, like, we really want the best of both worlds. We don't want to give up that face-to-face, because there's some communication that just happens. And probably, Brian, back to your point about, the people getting a little resentful of the team that's in the home base, because you have those kind of like water cooler conversations of, you see somebody in the hallway and be like, oh, hey, I forgot to, and those, like, passing in the hall, that doesn't happen remotely. So you have to be more intentional about your reach outs and your communication, and you get kind of like fewer passive ideas that way. So we didn't want to lose that. So what we think we're going to do, and this is, again, years down the road, but we'd like to stay in the same geographic area and have permanent office space for the executive team, and maybe some other folks whose roles really have to be done on site, some like maybe technology support people that have to be based, and then have a series of hotel cubes and meeting space, so that if employees want to come in, or they're in from out of town or whatever, and they're meeting with the executive team, they have a comfortable place where they can come for a few days, a few weeks, whatever, and then meeting space whenever we want to drop in. So and I think that's probably going to be the way a lot of companies go, especially bigger established companies. They don't want to pay the giant lease anymore, and they're starting to see that they don't need the giant space anymore, which, again, is not great for real estate. But I do think there's an opportunity to get those more modular, multi-use spaces that companies can kind of mold how they need.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Karen, I'll give you a little bit of optimism here. Just because I'm a glass always full guy, right?
Yeah.
The workings of this virtual economy have been very challenging for me. I'm an extrovert. If that's not already obvious, I'll state it. And all of my outlets are very diminished, right? I can't go play soccer. I can't randomly bump into somebody getting coffee. I can't be out and about the way it used to charge me up. And so I've definitely struggled with finding balance when I'm in this chair way too much. But what that's really forced for many is a need and a calling for connection in a different way. And I think in some capacity, we're all really, really eager to find a space to go. And while it will naturally be different, I think there's going to be even more value in a shared space, a commercial zone that houses a bunch of people that allow you to connect whenever we feel safe enough to do that. And outside of this, I've got a company that does leadership, really like high power, high leadership, high performance stuff in retreats. And the demand for that is going through the roof because people are like, I want to connect and I want to learn and I want to grow.
Yeah.
And sort of to bisect these two ideas, where I see a lot of potential is in sort of this shared space that's open, where you can get an office and just get out of the house for a day, right? Like I need a rescue. I need somebody to throw me a lifeline. Can I borrow an office for a day or 2 days? And I really see a lot of potential in doing that coming in the next 1 to 2 years, where companies are like, we got to do this for mental health reasons.
Aaron,
Well, let me
just one more. Oh,
at the
I just
moment.
want to say, Aaron, on a follow up on that, do you feel like those locations have to be city, or could you do that in the suburbs, like Howard County or Baltimore County or something like that?
We're in the suburbs.
Before you follow up on that, let me just do a quick time check, because we're not going to shut the room down or what have you, but we wanted to thank everybody for coming, and we hope you'll participate in future ones. And if you have ideas for future potential of EdTech meetings, panelists, topics, or what have you, let us know. It is 8:06, and nobody will feel bad if you check out, but we'll be here. We're not going to turn the lights off. So go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ed. Thanks you guys for tuning in. It's been an awesome panel. Like, wow, I'm very humbled to be included among the group here. That's quite an honor. So Karen, to answer your question, if this trend continues where virtual work is now a staple, which in many ways it already has become a staple, then we are now approaching an area of time where being urban no longer serves the same utility that it used to.
Yeah.
Right? The advantages of urban living were proximity and value. And both of those things have been dramatically disrupted because proximity is no longer the paramount value exchange. And the value of being downtown is now technologically enhanced with things like Uber Eats, restaurant delivery, like all those things are now out the window. You also can't go to gyms and do the same things that you used to do. So the value of being downtown has changed a lot. So long-windedly to answer, I do think there's opportunities outside of urban communities to really develop and blossom these hubs. The challenge though will be, how do you find the right people, and how do you consistently find hubs that are remote workers that want to get out, right? So it's just going to be a marketing challenge, but ultimately urban living has been significantly disrupted, just like other industries. We just haven't felt it yet because people are locked into leases.
Thank you, guys.
I'll give you one of my clients in a different industry is actually buying more large building real estate because he feels that synergy, what Aaron was talking about, is so important to his company. But in order to do it, he's going to need 4 times as much space because people are not going to want to be packed like sardines.
Right.
And I think the same thing for schools and colleges. You know, people are going to be looking for bigger, better ventilated spaces.
Better ventilated, yeah.
These are great audience questions. Just while we're waiting for the next one, these are great.
Any thoughts on topics? One of the things that, David, your question put in my mind was the number one thing that I think many initial startup owners encounter is they're startup illiterate. They might have an accounting degree, or like when I was involved in a startup, I had multiple computer science degrees. I had no idea what these VCs and these other investors were talking about and how they needed even like accounting data brought to them. And just, the biotech industry, BioBuzz, ran one that was a startup CFO. like what that person actually does in a startup, which is very different than a CFO at a normal company. But like all those tips, it's like, they don't teach that so well in college. Everybody's got to get a book or learn it on the street.
Well, certainly, I put in a little thing in the chat about when we opened the startup at the Armory in downtown Towson, and certainly one of our objectives going forward in entrepreneurship is how do we do that better at the student level to give them that experience. That's why we've started the Accelerator program to do a more intensive look at supporting community and student startups. So this is what we're trying to do. I'm going to jump in. The one thing that I thought was fascinating, Bryan, and I think would be really cool to think about is that that learning experience platform. I hadn't heard that, Bryan. I think that's really, really interesting. And so I would be fascinated to really understand more in thinking about what that might look like in the future, because that's a fantastic idea. So maybe that's a topic for the future, Ed.
Well, we can get you a demonstration of it. I can certainly get one of the product leads from the LXP division to give you a demonstration of it. It's definitely interesting right now. To have that kind of Netflix of learning that's personalized and kind of has the algorithm that can recommend different things for you to learn based on what the objective of whoever's setting it up is. It's an up and coming concept. A lot of it for me right now, Ed David is to get more content repositories behind it. The content hasn't quite caught up yet, but Go1 is a good company. Open Sesame is a good company where they have tons of repositories of content. Obviously, LinkedIn Learning has a little bit of that in the way they're doing things. Their model is a little different, but Open Sesame, Go1, there's a couple of others that are starting to get big repositories of hundreds of thousands of content objects that might be a 5-minute course on SEO. And if you're a marketing manager and you want your team to learn SEO this week, you might put that into their learning plan, and they just have micro learning at 5 minutes from the content you can pull directly into that LXP, and then you can track it. You can see what they did. You can see what their outcomes are. It can lead them down a rabbit hole of other content that might be similar if they like it.
If you set up the LXP demo, I'm going to invite myself.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the concept of evaluation tools? There's a very exciting company in Baltimore called Catalyte that basically is able to find top talent in non-normal places for software development by essentially creating a Moneyball engine off of test results that they've developed. And I'm like, what if we did that with children and figured out natural ability in certain areas?
Yeah. I think that would make for a lot of less frustrated and more successful children.
Yeah, interestingly, Ed, the bottleneck to me, if we found someone that was ready to be a software engineer, the rest of the curriculum doesn't support them becoming a software engineer. So this is a great opportunity to take that and merge it with the other evolutions that we're going through and rewrite the whole train system. It'd be great. I'm in. Let's do it. You and me.
Yeah, what's so funny is the sports industry in this country is so adept at doing this and finding, the 7-foot kid that can dribble like the wind. But the academic analogy of that is almost like there's a sort of politics to it, like you're tracking students into some sort of career instead of free will or follow your dream or something. Yet for like computer science, we lose a ton of kids because we don't figure out that they're good at it until a lot of times they've got a degree in something else and can't get a job.
Yeah. My cousin did that. He got his degree in percussion, realized that it was hard to make a living as a drummer, especially if you have $80,000 in college loans. So he went to a coding boot camp, and now that's what he does.
And that's, Emily, that's the alternative pathways that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right? That model is so in its infancy, I believe, for what we'll see 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where when you're coming out of school, you'll probably know to some degree what that proficiency is that you have. And you may say, well, I go to a 4-year school and I can go to a 2
Right.
that has a guaranteed employment at the end, as long as I receive 80% throughout the entire program. There's lots of those forming. WASAC, or what was it? WASNIAC, WASU.
Yeah.
There's a great book called, I think it's called The New You, a new and then the letter U. I highly recommend that book. It's a guy that has an investment arm. I can't remember his name, but he invests in only, oh my gosh, you're amazing. That was so unbelievable.
Oh, look at that.
Do that. Eh? How did you read my mind?
Product placement. I like it.
Stop it. That was uncanny. I can't do that. But yeah, so I've met him before, and I met him at ASU GSV, and I forget his name, but a couple years ago I met him, and you have his name right there?
Ryan Craig.
Ryan Craig.
He's in New York.
Yeah. He is. He was a fascinating guy. He invests in all these alternative pathways, which is what Emily's talking about, where they know exactly where they want to go, and then a lot of times they're free. The pathway is free. So if you're going through a financial pathway, for example, to relate to Aaron here, and maybe Vanguard is funding it, plus Citibank, plus 5 others, and they're doing it as a recruitment area because they know they're going to get the best talent, and they can see the scores they're getting across the 2 years or 1 year, and they can help dictate the exact content that they need them to what goes back to what you should be learning. So if you're not familiar with the alternative pathway models that are out there, there's hundreds of them. We have some of them as our clients using our learning management system as the platform to put their content in, and then they have some type of a outcome at the end that leads to potentially a guaranteed job and maybe a free 1 or 2 year pathway. So they don't have to pay anything for it, and they're guaranteed a job. So that's kind of an interesting area for more opportunity, I think, right now.
There's an interesting business here in Baltimore called TransEd. Paul and I have had a lot of talks, and what they've essentially done is say, hey, job market, if you're looking for tech people, we will go find them and offer them an apprenticeship, and we'll like build the on-ramp for them. And I think, Bryan, to your points, there's a tremendous opportunity in vocations and trades and things of that nature that have been off the wheelhouse for a long time, but interestingly are going to pay more, cost less, and have more openings than some other fields. And I'm really excited for him and for other opportunities like that, especially where there are students that can't see themselves at college, don't see themselves as a lifelong student, or don't have access to that kind of capital. And we know that's a big problem across social lines as well.
This has been really fun, Emily. You're doing
Yeah.
it. Yeah, this is a pretty exciting night.
This was a good one. I feel like our last one was really good too. We're on a roll. I like it.
Nowhere to go but up.
Exactly.
Yeah, I tell you, one of the things that if people want to talk about it in another meeting, rather than wait a quarter, that concept of having some sort of online EdTech Baltimore incubator, I think that's got like wheels. I'm not sure if that's a LinkedIn group or something more formal, but just what Bryan was saying about that, information interchange that happens in the coffee room. It would be, and there used to be so much more of that. Like, I want to say when Katrina Stevens and Andrew Coy and those guys were involved, there was so much like Facebook group and I think it was EdTech Maryland group interaction between people, and maybe we can recapture some of that. Yeah,
Stephen put it in the chat, and I was just thinking the same thing, that a Slack channel would be a nice place to start too, just to kind of open. And I know, David, that you have the TU Incubator has its own Slack channel, but if you wanted to combine cross incubator, cross accelerator, that might be a nice idea.
Give it some thought.
Hi guys, I've been quiet. I asked some of the questions earlier on, and I'm not really in the EdTech space, although I'm trying to move my company there. My background is quite a bit in education and ed tech. But one of the areas I think is fascinating and really now speaks to the condition we're living in with COVID is, how do you teach skills? How do you teach skills, hands-on skills in this environment? I know we've been doing it. I was involved in cyber education for a while. We were trying to do that with virtual lab environments and things like that. And I know there's companies doing that via simulation and other tools. I just think that's just a fascinating area between that and even hands-on simulations or medical skills simulation training. There's a lot of that going on too. So I think just a huge area, I think really worthy of discussion if we were to schedule something in the future.
There's two really cool companies in the area at a minimum that I know of. One is Mosaic Learning in Columbia. They actually do virtual reality training systems for things like welding associations. And Breakaway Games actually doesn't do much in the game industry anymore.
Yeah, I know those guys really well. I wasn't gonna name names, but yeah, that's absolutely. They do great work. And I'm trying to think. There's another group that's that's in the cybersecurity space that's doing some great work. And I know a couple. There's a lab company a friend of mine has founded that does a lot of work with creating hands-on lab environments for students in the cybersecurity space. So it's a lot of great stuff going on. I just think it's a a great area for exploration and discussion.
I agree. We'll add it to the list.
For sure.
So what does your company do?
Hang on, I have to unmute. I run corporate sales for a company called Ortus Technologies. We're in Annapolis, Maryland, and we specialize in component content management systems. So ideally, as content has exploded, being able to create and edit content at a component level, and by that I mean, you can there's sections of content you can reuse no matter which course you're putting it in. But we use basically XML based technologies to make that happen. So we've been really interested in figuring out that connection between what we're doing on the content management side and connecting to the EdTech ecosystem, because at the end of the day, you may change out your LMS a dozen times, but your content's got to live somewhere, and you've got to have a way to manage that effectively and make sure that those pieces are always up to date. You've got the version control, the metadata associated with it, that you can reuse it, that you can put it into different, different learning ecosystems. If you're a publisher, for example, so you're not tied just to any one platform, one system. But that's really what we do. And my background's in publishing, and so it's kind of a good fit. I see the connection, and we definitely see the connection. We like to have those conversations. And Bryan, I actually work with your team on a few opportunities. So yeah, I'm cheating.
I was getting ready. I didn't know if you want me to say it, but you're working with Trevor right now on one, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So anyway,
that's a great one. Hopefully we got a lot more products now for you to be.
Yeah, no, it really is a great week for you guys. Very, very exciting. So
yeah,
a lot of fun.
Yeah, Trevor's got a basket of new content and places you can house the content and analytics tools that we can now wrap in there. So we're just, as you can imagine, getting our feet underneath us right now and building some new integrations to all their tools. We've got quite a few ready. So very cool stuff. Yeah, I can't wait to talk to you. I was waiting and chatting with Josh Mitchell and Randy Jones a little bit, and I was telling them you were here, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy's great. We've done a bunch of RFPs with them."
Yeah, you got a great group there. I enjoy working with them very much. So
yep.
A lot of fun.
Great questions throughout too. Your questions were coming in all throughout the session. That makes it fun.
Yeah, it's a great space. I really appreciate you guys putting this together. And a lot of fun.
Yep. Let's certainly talk more soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great segue.
Yep.
Well, I feel like we got to let the panelists go. They've given so much of their time and everything else. So I was just going to say happy holidays and let's stay in touch, and we'll see you next quarter.
Ed, can I ask a question? Is there an after party that goes after this?
There used to be.
Used to
There
be.
used to be.
Brian's ready to celebrate.
Yeah.
And I think drinks are on him. If
Yeah,
I'm
drinks on Brian.
No
Yeah.
problem. Let's do it. I'm in. You want me to send you a beer to your house right now or something?
yes.
Uber Eats.
Awesome.
There's a new concept.
Yeah, Uber drinks.
That's
All right,
great.
guys, thanks so much for your time. I do appreciate you guys asking me. It was really nice. Thanks.
Happy holidays,
Sure.
everybody.
Yeah, happy holidays. Thanks,
you.
everyone.
You know,
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Erin.
I know.
Bye.
everyone.